What is up? Welcome to Go Bucks. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We greatly appreciate it. We're here today with Matt, and Brian is on the line, and we are going to talk some Buckeyes in Michigan. And what's up, guys? I think there's like some major stuff going on from what I hear.
We're back from the dead, Nate. We're back from the dead.
Yes, you guys slithered out of your grave within 1 week. You didn't have to go through the typical, painful, full 365 days of pain. That
Listen, when you play that gauntlet of a schedule, that vaunted Notre Dame offense to start the season, then you go thank God for that Penn State win, which was wasn't the greatest game in the world, but hey, they got that win, got that done, man. Win. Yep. And so what a down year across the board, right? I mean, in almost any other year you would not get this. But hey, you know what? Let's not talk about that. Let's celebrate the fact that we have two Big Ten teams in, and by viewership, they are the most popular programs in the country. Let's get it on.
Yes, you know what? It is as irritated as I am that the Buckeyes have this new life. And there was a commenter on one of our last shows that said he's been watching us for a while, and he actually called out and said, Matt looks happier than I've seen him this whole time, like in a month. And that was right after the USC game. They lost. Yeah. Matt was beaming. He didn't have to. He went through 1 week of pain from losing to Michigan, and he was beaming. Yeah. I say that's unfair.
And I told you after the game when we did the live show right after we lost, I told you I wasn't that upset because I still thought we might get in.
Yeah, when I called it too, when we had that when I was on with you guys last, and I said I felt like there was more pressure on Michigan to win it, because Ohio State still had a chance because of their schedule. I don't think Michigan would be in. I don't know that for sure. I mean, it is weird because even TCU lost and then didn't move. So there's a chance that Michigan could have gotten in because there really wasn't any other opportunity. But I think the other thing we need to be thankful for, and I hate to be like this because I loved watching the kid play, but if Hendon Hooker hadn't been hurt, Tennessee might be this fourth seed, not Ohio State. So a lot of things had to go right. A lot of things had to go right for Ohio State. But I think that's the fact that TCU lost and they played with fire all year. They lost the game and didn't move is a testament to how kind of, I don't want to say weak, but how muddied this season has been for, across the country. So it's been really, really fascinating, and you knew who number one and number two were going to be, but obviously there was some drama there. But Ohio State gets new life, and Georgia gets rewarded by playing the harder of the 3 and 4 seeds in this first game. That's for sure.
Yeah, they do, and that was a good word, muddied. It's just been really awful. I mean, it's been going up and down this whole season. No team really wanted to actually be in this playoffs, and there was obviously no one actually wants the Heisman because we're like it's frantic here at the end. New guys like Stetson Bennett are just all of a sudden going to New York.
I don't think I don't know that I would characterize it that way. I would certainly say injuries played a huge part in who is going to New York. Huge, because Hendon Hooker should have been there or would have been there. Blake Corum would have been there. Mm-hmm. Had he played in the Ohio State game, even if Donovan Edwards had put up the numbers, I think Blake Corum, just by playing, would have been there. Should still be there, and Michael Penix to me should be there for sure. Yeah. I mean, the only I think he missed. I don't know how many games he missed because of injury. I think it was at least one, but he still led the country in passing yards. And he played an amazing year for a resurgent Washington team. But neither he nor Bo Nix are there from the Pac-12. Only Caleb Williams, who's probably going to win it. But it's interesting. I don't think it was for lack of want to. I just think it was just a crazy year. I mean, you obviously Alabama is typically in this foursome. I certainly thought they were going to be there at the beginning of the year, but they had 5 one possession games. It wasn't just the fact that you got to give them credit for they had a hell of a schedule. I mean, I think the loss at Tennessee, the loss at LSU, I said it the last time I was on with you guys. I still believe it. I don't think either Ohio State nor Michigan get through that 2-game stretch without a loss. but Alabama lost them both, and they played Texas tight. They just didn't have a really good win on their schedule. And I think it's pretty clear that even though Alabama's loaded, it's not as good of an Alabama team as we've seen the last couple of years. And so they were off the board. Clemson was not very good. So right away, two of the teams that look like they had a pretty inside track to be in there were out, and that opened the door. And good on Michigan and Ohio State for being there and representing the Big Ten.
Yeah, very
Brian,
true.
You made a good point too about how the pressure was on Michigan more so than Ohio State for this game. It really reminds me of last year where I felt like Georgia, when they were playing the SEC championship game against Alabama, that even though they had, well, I guess it's hard to say which team was really better last year, but they definitely knew that they didn't need to win that game. So it's hard to get up for a game when you're in no matter what. And Bama knew they needed to win that game. They were dialed in. They played amazing. I still think if Jamison Williams was healthy for the whole of the national title game, that I think Bama still would have won, or at least could have won. So I'm not really sure if that was.
And doesn't that show? I don't either, but I certainly think if you're talking about Alabama, just real quickly, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time talking about them, but you look at what was clearly an offense that had issues last year and got bailed out by the unbelievable ability of Jamison Williams and I can't remember who's the other wide receiver, Mechie, and they were not this dominant group. There was not the Devontae Smith offense that we ran into in the championship game by any stretch. And then this year, if not for Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, Bryce Young's a really good player. I'm not taking anything away from him. He makes magic happen, but he does have some limitations. And if not, Jahmyr Gibbs was the only home run hitter on that entire offense. And their offensive line wasn't that good. And what's crazy is to see a bunch of these offensive linemen from Alabama jumping into the portal, like guys that were starters. It's crazy. So
not just their line; they already have like 17 or 19 people in the portal.
It's insane.
Yeah,
we're
going to talk about, because there's been actually some talk that there is some massive transfer portal chatter happening. That's going to happen after the playoffs. Actually, Joel Klatt actually even said that. And maybe 9 days ago, we did a show about Travion, the potential of him. And, it just looked so possible when he was on the sideline.
It wasn't just potential. It wasn't just potential. He took out all the Ohio State stuff off of his social media.
Yeah.
What is everyone supposed to think about that?
Well, look, as much as I like Travion, let's not throw too much hyperbole on him specifically. I mean, I think he's a good player, but it's not like Drake May going out there and testing the water and seeing what he was worth, and then deciding to go back for, I'm sure, a nice hefty little raise on his NIL at North Carolina. It is a crazy world, and I am still I don't even know what to describe myself as right now. But listening, I don't know if you guys listen to Zach Smith's podcast.
Oh yeah,
the Menace of Sports. But this last one that was about the NIL, I'm shook, man. I'm really shook, because if Ohio State specifically, but if Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, these Midwest teams don't get their act together with this NIL, this may be the last time that we see something like this playoff. I'm dead serious.
Yeah, and you know what? The sad thing is? The North, like the Big Ten, like Michigan, Ohio State, it's that whole group. They could own NIL if they wanted to. With their alumni, they're incredibly rich. And with USC joining, USC has incredibly rich alumni. If the Big Ten really wanted to put their foot down, they could step on the necks of everyone if they just really wanted to get their money.
That's why I was
really
excited for NIL. I was so excited for NIL because at the beginning you had all these southern schools that were, finding ways to give someone's uncle at a church hundreds of thousands of dollars so Cam Newton could come play for your school at Auburn, and none of that stuff ever, no one ever gets in trouble for that. And so the North, like you were saying, I think a lot of these northern schools have all this money, and they just were never willing to do, not that Ohio State or anyone else never paid players. Obviously, some amounts of money was getting paid over the years, but the amounts that were being thrown around in the South were outrageous. So I think that we should be able to do it. It's just there's a certain amount of recruits that just they want the money in advance before they will go anywhere now.
Look,
so they want that signing bonus.
I really don't want to get into the judgment of the rationale for these kids, because I know for a fact if I were 18 years old and had the chance to get $500,000 to set my parents up, especially if I came from somewhere other than the burbs, where my family's safety was paramount, and the choice is go somewhere you may not necessarily be in love with, but you can move your parents out of a bad situation, or I'm just throwing that out there. It could be anything. Put whatever even if you're just setting yourself up as a guarantee. There's no guarantee. I mean, look at a guy like Cam Babb. Like, that dude he might have been a first-round wide receiver too. We'll never know. He had 4 ACL tears. Like, he's not making money in the future playing. He's never going to get an NFL contract. So, like, that dude, a $200,000 signing bonus to that guy could. Now, I'm not saying I don't know his family situation, but I just mean, the rumor has been that Mark Fletcher, the running back from Florida, really wanted to come to Ohio State, but Florida gave him a pile of cash to sign down there. The rumor was he doesn't even know who the running back's coach's name was. But it's a situation where they're giving him so much money for a 2-year commitment, and maybe the guy comes and transfers back as a junior. But holy crap, if we don't get our act together and start understanding, Ryan Day came out and made a bunch. It was a big splash when he said he thought it was going to take about $13 million to keep a roster together of the quality that Ohio State's been able to keep together these last few years, every single year. The foundation's not raising. Well, and the foundation's not even close to raising that. So we thought, I know for me as an Ohio State fan, I thought we were ahead of the game. And then I listened to that podcast today, and I'm shook, man. I'm like, we've got to get together, or the one yesterday on the NIL. And I was like, oh my God, we're not even close. And we're going to end up, we're steadily seeing fewer and fewer and fewer 5-stars coming into your program. And it's not that good on Michigan for winning with a program that has clearly not, even you can admit, Michigan has not recruited on the level of Ohio State or Georgia or Alabama the last 10 years, even the last 5 years, even the last 2 years.
They're way behind.
Getting J.J. McCarthy was great, but holy crap, you talk about maximizing talent, and you talk about going out and hitting a home run in the transfer portal. I mean, they don't win without that center from Virginia.
Yeah, and the coaching pickups the last 2 years.
And they're young. Like, those guys were young. They let established names go and went with younger guys, and it's been amazing. But the point being, with if none of that's going to matter, like, Michigan beat Ohio State for the second year in a row in Columbus, statement win, and what do they get for it? They lose their best recruit to Miami to a pile of money. It doesn't matter. Your coaching doesn't matter. Your wins don't matter anymore. Like, it doesn't matter. You better have some money. You better have a good offer. And it's scary times, man.
It is. And you know what? If you look at Michigan right now, like, they're like ranked number 20. And yeah, they have developed their players. Kudos to them. But that's not going to last forever. I mean, no. Right now, Michigan's fighting the NIL issue and the fact that Harbaugh tried to jump to the NFL last year. If I was a recruit, that's a double whammy for me. You're like,
I'm telling you right now, I would be shocked. And I'm not just saying this, I'm not talking shit, I don't know anything. This is just my opinion. But I will be shocked if he does not take that Colts job this year. With all this nonsense with the NIL, he doesn't have to put up with this. He can go out like a freaking god, no matter what happens in the playoff. I mean, I think they have to beat TCU. But if they get to a championship game, even if they lost to Georgia or, God forbid, Ohio State, the fact I don't think Ohio State is necessarily getting there, but either way, even if you don't win it, the fact that you've beaten Ohio State the way you beat them 2 years in a row, like, you can go out top of the mountain, and you don't have to mess with this NIL crap anymore. Because if you don't have an NIL program on par with the South. We are not like the days of competing with them year in and year out are over.
Let's take this.
This could be the last year.
Or statement. Hi, Antoine. How's it going?
Yeah, Antoine, he's got he put a comment up, a smart one, I think. And this, I think, will eventually happen too. He says, I think it will eventually backfire on teams in terms of its culture and development. The NIL, like everything that we're doing here, is it's going to a dark place. Like I can tell that it's going to a dark place. We all teams have to jump on board, obviously, to some degree, Michigan and Ohio State. But it's moving so fast, you can tell this is not going to end well.
Yeah,
like I just don't see it ending well.
Everything going on with Texas A&M. I mean, they had this huge class last year, the most 5-stars ever, highest rated class ever, and they're losing a ton of players from not all from that class last year, but they lost a ton of players in the portal. So it's interesting. I don't know how I would like to see some of the contracts that people are getting for these NIL deals because they aren't allowed to specifically be tied to performance. So I wonder what exactly is in the contract keeping them at the school. I mean, I know they're ways
no one knows. That's that. There's no transparency with any of this stuff, and technically, it's not affiliated with the school. So even big boosters that typically give to the program are not necessarily affiliated, officially but no one knows, and technically the coaches can't even know. Of course they do, but no, they're not going to share that. So it's wild.
It is wild.
Really wild, man.
And you know what? It's almost like it's the wild, wild west right now. I mean, who can't start an NIL collective at this point? Heck, we could start an Go Bucks NIL collective now if we wanted to.
I firmly believe, when on the Zach Smith thing, he was talking about a subscription, a fan-based subscription service. I guarantee we're all going to that. We're all going to be asked at some point. It's going to be like, all right, you want to support your team? $10 a month. Would you give $10 a month, Matt, to support the Buckeyes?
Well, I think he also mentioned that they were starting that for next year. So that was something that.
Oh, Matt wouldn't, because his wife would not allow that to happen. Like she would not allow him to spend his allowance, his weekly allowance, on something like that. But I agree. I would throw in a few bucks. Who wouldn't?
No, you're going to. It's not a matter of if; it's a matter of when. and it's what's wild is I do think we are in an adjustment period where, just like Texas A&M, they went out and bought that historic class, and we knew years ago. Remember when Ole Miss went from wherever they were in the 50s in recruiting, all of a sudden they had that number 1 class, and we're like, the bag man. We all knew what was up. The same thing happened at Texas A&M. And the problem was, paying for a high school recruit, even a 5-star, is a really bad investment. A really bad investment, because you just don't know. You don't know if that guy's going to pan out or not. You don't know if he's a hard worker or not. You have no idea. I mean, it's an 18-year-old kid. So, but the point is, you at least have to have that, because, if you don't, then you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt just based on your culture and your program and your track record anymore.
Yeah,
you got to have both.
It seems like the better investment is going to be paying for the proven commodities that have already done well at a lesser program.
Well, so, and they're going to have to sign contracts too. I mean, at some point they're going to get so much money, it's going to there's going to have to be some sort of commitment to the school for a period of time. But
you saw some of this. It works like the vehicle lease, right? Like when Quinn Ewers was at Ohio State and he had the lease and then he transferred, and obviously the lease was broken. But that there are some terms. There's going to be some for upfront cash. I mean, even when they said Quinn Ewers was the first big one, right? They said however many millions it was that he had signed that endorsement deal. But damn well that it's who's leaking that? His agent, probably. And it's whenever you hear contract terms, whatever sport you follow professionally, you hear contract terms, the total number. Who was Xander Bogaerts just signed with the Padres, 11 years, $280 million. Okay, but how much, and baseball is a little different because it's guaranteed, but with football, when you hear some guy signed for a $300 million contract and you go, okay, but how much of that's guaranteed? How much of it's, it's all in the devil's always in the details. But the point is the weird thing about the NIL is all of there's no transparency over any of that. So, you hear the rumors. You hear, okay, Mark Fletcher went for $750,000 for 2 years. Okay, well, does anybody know that for sure? Like nobody knows. So,
what is he signing for 2 years? How do we know that's 2 years? Is that just a rumor?
I have no idea. It's just a rumor. And the one thing we do know, at least there's the rumor that the starter for Alabama was salty that his backup had a sweeter NIL deal than him. That's why he's in the portal.
That's going to happen.
Drake May going out there to go test his value. And so, like, you can imagine a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., like that dude blew up, and he may not be, I'm just saying a guy like that who just comes out of nowhere as a sophomore and is God's gift. The Jordan Addisons, like, go out there. And even if you don't leave, you go out and see what your value is to shop it. And these guys are like doing this. They're basically doing it like free agency in the NFL, but they're doing it as 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. It's insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
And you know what? They are going out and testing their value too. Like you said, like Drake May, he probably went out and thought, hey, you know what? Can be like another, like a coach would do. Like he would say, you want to get more money from the school you're at. You can go out, test the waters, see what's out there, and your school is going to come back and say, hey, we'll up it a little bit for you. And that happens in the business world. That happens with all kinds of jobs too. So
I have no problem with that. I just think what really sucks about it is what the future could be like when you have, you can envision a real problem where historic programs who don't want to engage in that or do not fully support their NIL support structure, it doesn't work together. They don't want to engage in that. They're going to get left behind. And it may happen really, really a lot faster than we think it is. And I mean that when I say, like, not only should we be excited and celebrating the fact that this is the first time 2 Big Ten teams have made this 14 playoff, guys, it could be the last time in a long time. Like, not just a 12-team playoff. I'm just talking about like 2 teams that make it to the Final Four. Even if you go to a 12-team or 16-team or whatever you want to do, like being good enough, having a good enough talent, not only you guys made the point, not just players, but coaching too. That, look at, and the conference as a whole, you have to give kudos to the Big Ten. The programs, several of the programs in the Big Ten that seem to be leveling up. I really am happy that, like, Fickle being at Wisconsin, them adding USC, UCLA. It's after this year, we're not going to have the joke is whoever comes out of the East basically gets a bye through the Big Ten championship game because they're going to play such a bad team from the West. That's not going to happen anymore.
Well, yeah, and those coaches aren't taking those jobs without knowing there's going to be some NIL support there. Like you're not going to get a big name coach anymore unless they know they've got a big pile of money that they can use to go out and get some players because they know they're going to need it.
Well,
and not just for them, but for their staffs and to put together a quality staff. That's huge.
So speaking of the potential of the NIL disaster that might be happening sooner rather than later, hopefully it won't. But if Ohio State's not getting their act together on we're losing recruits already, but we haven't lost any players yet. Obviously we aren't going to really find anything out until after the playoffs are over. But I'm concerned, and I think a lot of Ohio State fans are concerned that we're going to not only lose out on recruits, but we're going to lose our proven stars because they're going to get poached by someone else who just drops a couple $1 million over here. Like if you're going to, people are willing to spend, $1 million or $2 million for an unproven top-rated quarterback who hasn't played, it's still in high school. Like how much are they going to pay for Marvin Harrison? And with what Joel Klatt was saying, that he's heard rumblings of a top player that's going to potentially, shake the foundation of college football. Like, I wonder who he's hearing. Like who? I mean, I don't think it would be anyone on Georgia because Georgia's paying their players well. So that means it's going to be either TCU, Ohio State, or Michigan. And the only people I could think of that would shake the foundation of the sport would be like a proven star like Marvin Harrison getting paid, $3 million a year to go somewhere else, or maybe Donovan Edwards or Blake Corum.
Well,
I don't
and
know.
look, what one thing Antoine just said in the comments is smart. It's like Michigan, I think, is doing the right way. First, they get the best staff, then they're into recruiting and development. I mean, it's still got to be there. I mean, you're not going to be Texas A&M, right? Pay all the players, and I don't know if they have bad coaches, but something happened there. We don't know what happened to the culture there, but if you do have the coaches and you have the recruiting and you have everything set up, and you get the money, then I think it's still going to be those top teams that should shake out to kind of be the same way it is now.
But Ohio State and Michigan had 70 million, something like 70 million viewers for all their games this year.
They blew everyone out of the water.
It blew everybody out of the water. Their popularity is at an all-time high. They just need to commit. They need to get their act together and understand
popularity. A lot of
they're not going to lack money. Those Big Ten teams, Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, if you go to places like Chicago, downtown, they've got bars dedicated to Ohio State there. I mean, as much as that pains me to see that, I mean, but that just goes to show that all around the country, Michigan and Ohio State are two really, really popular teams. They've got the money if they want it. There's a big bag of money in the back. They're not tapping into it yet.
Well, they haven't played that. They have not historically had to really play that game, or they've stayed out of the fray that the teams in the South haven't. And, that's, I think, a big part of what you do need to have a culture to keep guys. And I think even Ryan Day said as much, I think it was last year when he was talking about recruiting, that, their whole deal was they don't, at some point you can't convince somebody to come somewhere they don't want to be. Now I think you can with a big pile of cash, but short of that, that, and ultimately the comment, I think from the post was 100% right, that, that's what I would worry about is, there's a sense of entitlement with most teenagers anyway. You give a kid who really hasn't done jack shit on a higher level a 6-figure promise for 2 years. He comes in and it's almost like the first round draft pick, and especially in the sport like baseball, it takes a while to develop. Like that guy's going to get a million chances to be to make mistakes. The guy who's the 12th round pick, or the guy at the, classes, you got to have depth. It's not just one dude on a team sport that, you got 3 phases that have to play together to really win. You got to have 50 guys. And it's not always the 5-star top 15 defensive end. It's sometimes like the guy who's playing nickel corner, who was a 3-star and developed into, a star. That has to happen too. And if a guy who's, I think, Nate, to your point, if a guy establishes himself as a college starter and then some high school kid's getting paid more than him just because of a recruiting ranking, you got to bust your ass to make it at a top Power 5 college program. You got to work your ass off. You can't be afraid to have coaches up in your face. Like, you really got to work at it. And, guys who really make it talk about that all the time, that they need to get that, that there's a moment that comes when they get humbled. And, how does that happen when the guy's potentially making as much or more as, than his coach? And I'm not talking, there's always been that conversation about the NFL, but those guys are 25, 26, 30-year-old professionals at that point. Mm-hmm. These are kids, man. These are like teenagers. It's unbelievable,
One of the things that I think Ohio State does have in its favor, in addition to like the coaching and the culture and everything, that can help. Like, I mean, we're at a disadvantage, at least right now, because we don't have, the guaranteed money up front for a lot of these kids. But I think one of the things that they have been doing well is teaching the kids how to make their brand and how to make money off of their brand once they enroll. And I think that's still going to be a really good value until, to at least keep a decent amount of the recruits, and hopefully we can also add to that by getting some money up front too.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I think like when you're talking about coaching and development, how many times, I mean, for as much as Texas A&M paid those players, how many times do you think someone like Jimbo Fisher probably got in their face and said something like, how much money are we paying you? How many millions are we paying? Throwing it in their face. Like how many times I could just totally see him doing that, and eventually those kids are going to get like, hey, yeah, I'm making a bunch of money here, but I can just leave and make a bunch of money somewhere else too.
Well, not just that, but I mean, they also, they weren't winning.
Yeah, they're not winning.
It's a totally different. I think it's a totally different deal if you're successful. They had a horrific season where they were the butt of every joke nationally, and and all the rumors have been that the culture is just horrendous there. So, we all know 1 year's worth of kids. Typically, when you look back and you look at the really dominant teams, the Georgias, all those Alabama years, most of the time it's kids that have been in the program 3 years. Not always, but generally, like, a lot of your redshirt sophomores and your juniors are typically the bread and butter of the best players that are on the best teams. And so it takes, you got to have that first class, but you also have to stack classes, and it takes time for those even if you got a badass freshman, JT Tuimoloau, that kind of player, Marvin Harrison Jr. He barely got on the field to the end of the year when they had to play him. So those guys takes a while to develop, both physically, mentally, personally, and that stuff doesn't come instantaneously. And that's what I do think. My hope of this is, we all know NIL is not going away. We know the transfer portal is not going away. My hope, though, is that this is like this first holy shit moment, and there's going to be an adjustment period, and then it'll start to equalize a little bit. I mean, the teams that aren't doing real well with it, that have the horsepower to do it, will probably catch up some. And then, this whole idea of we've got to rush out and buy this class of kids, we're coming off COVID, we're coming off a lot of weird stuff, the transfer portal really coming online, and then NIL. And I do think it'll be, and some of these kind of recruiting mistakes will start to even themselves out once people realize, it's not really a great idea to give a high school kid $1 million. I don't care how good the kid is.
And they're all going to have $1 million.
The Senate,
all the good ones anyway. So let me ask you guys a question. So
I'm sorry, Matt, let Matt finish that thought. I didn't get a chance to hear him.
What's that, Matt?
They have a new NIL bill that's being proposed in the Senate right now. So I think that, if that can actually get passed, that would be, we need some sort of regulation. I mean, not that it's generally hard to count on Congress to do many things. It's hard to get, the bipartisan support, but I think that something like sports, usually people can come together and realize that, we need some guardrails here.
So true.
Because everything is sort of out of control right now. But I do think it is interesting. I mean, let's say you're a booster down in Texas A&M and you're spending all of this money and you're not getting any return on your investment because of how poorly they're playing. So how long do you think that at a certain point they're just going to stop spending that much money, or do you think that they're just going to keep spending money until they get better results? Like I'm just curious how something like that is going to get changed when it's not working there.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's hard, and you would think, I just don't understand these Texas programs. How in the world can you be in Texas and be this shit year in and year out? I just don't understand it. You've got 5 stars,
all this money, and they can't do anything.
Unbelievable. Like seriously,
they're all going to Bama.
They do. Then a lot of them do, but not all of them. I mean, you get Oklahoma used to poach a bunch of them, but Oklahoma's certainly not the same as they were under Lincoln Riley.
Is JSN a Texas kid?
He is. Ohio State cleaned house. So is Garrett Wilson.
Oh my.
So is Garrett Wilson. So they went down there. Yeah, both those kids came from Texas. and Marvin Harrison's obviously a Pennsylvania kid, and so is Julian Fleming, and then Emeka Egbuka and JTT came from Washington, and CJ Stroud came from California. So you when you're recruiting on a national level like that, that's my hope, is that this craziness that's happening right now, that Ohio State and Michigan, because I am one of those Ohio State fans that thinks college football is just better when Michigan is better, because the rivalry, look at how fun the rivalry's been the last 2 years. Now, I wish they wouldn't have ducked Ohio State during the COVID year, but to equalize things a little bit. But it's been,
that was a mercy killing, by the way. 2020, yeah, that was a mercy. Yes. I like to joke and say that, Michigan was probably going to win that game with their third string quarterback, who I don't know his name. But that was a mercy killing. Totally. I don't
blame them for what they did. It's just it just drags. Now it's been a long time since Ohio State has beaten Michigan, but I will say that just this whole last year has been a lot of fun, and I think I hope that the Big Ten and Midwest football in general can build off this momentum of having two teams in the playoff. I really do, and not get left behind over money.
One of the other things I wanted to bring up and see what you guys were thinking. So in the past, the SEC is still probably the best conference this year. But in the past, it is, in my mind, it's been a lot more dominant. This is probably the worst year, I think, for an SEC across the board. As I can think, I can't remember the last time there was this many average or above average teams, but no elite teams. Georgia's obviously still really good, but I'm just sort of wondering if maybe we're overrating Georgia a little bit based on how poor the rest of the conference is this year. They're still getting the job done most weeks, but
that's a good transition.
Not doing well.
That's a good transition, because I wanted to have, since we got Brian on here, excuse me, I wanted to ask, so what are your thoughts about Georgia and Ohio State? Because I'm kind of bullish on Ohio State's chances of beating them. As terrible as that would be, because I think Michigan's probably going to beat TCU. What are your thoughts on that? Uh-oh, did we lose Brian? Well, Matt, I'll go to you on that.
I go back and forth on this. Initially I was excited to be there, and I really would like to get the chance at a rematch with you guys. But I was concerned about Georgia because they have, I guess I'm still probably putting a little bit too much emphasis on how good Georgia was at the beginning of the year, how they smoked Oregon. It turns out Oregon's not nearly as good as everyone thought they were. And then, they did have a pretty good win over Tennessee, but then, even South Carolina is smoking Tennessee. So it's not quite as big of a win as maybe we thought also. And then, they have had some close games. So I just think, they just have two or three players that I'm really worried about. So they have two tight ends. They're the biggest freaks in the country. And not just in receiving, but in blocking. I don't know how we're going to how we're going to deal with those guys blocking for the running game. I don't know how. Those are by far the biggest concerns. And then, although, we did do well against Michael Mayer in the Notre Dame game, and he's the best in the country. But, Georgia has two of those guys. They don't just have one.
Well, so, and Matt, I think we talked about it, in the run-up to the Michigan game, that I just didn't think Michigan could do the thing that you have to do to beat Ohio State, and I was flat wrong. They made 4 massive plays in the pass game, and Stetson Bennett can make those plays in the pass game. I don't think Georgia's going to run the ball particularly well against Ohio State. I really don't, because if anything, they'll go with the 3 linebacker group, and they've been good at stopping the run. There were 2 massive breakdowns on 2 plays at the end of that game where they weren't gap sound. They were gap sound the whole game. They granted Michigan started moving the ball in the second half, but they absolutely stonewalled them in the first half. But it's been the pass game that Ohio State's just gotten blown apart when you get these guys in one-on-one coverage, and that's what I'm scared of. is Georgia has some athletes out there, and Stetson Bennett, granted Stetson Bennett's not a great like down the field thrower, but they do enough things to keep you off balance in the pass game. And that's what I'm worried about. And if you go 3 linebacker to stop the run, then you got to try to cover those 2 tight ends with linebackers, and that's not going to be pretty. So, or safeties that haven't been good. I mean, that's where I worry quite a bit. But I mean, I do think Georgia got the short end of the stick between playing TCU and playing Ohio State.
They definitely got screwed.
I mean, Ohio State can beat them.
They can, and you guys will like this comment, by the way. I'm going to mispronounce it. It's Superman 1100. It says, this looks like 2014 for Ohio State, where everyone count us out, and we had to show up and take the trophy. Go Bucks.
Yep,
and
a lot of
similarities. A little bit like that, doesn't it?
A lot of similarities.
2014, Alabama probably took them for granted. Points.
Yeah, I want to say it was double figures, Matt. I think Alabama was favored by double figures, and I really thought Georgia would be favored by double figures too. But look, LSU threw all over Georgia, especially in the second half
for 500 yards. Yes.
Yeah. Ohio State can't air it out. It's all on CJ Stroud.
Second half when Georgia was up, but you can't just ignore 500 yards passing.
And they, what really, the more I've thought back about this Michigan game, even though the score was a lot like the one last year, the games were not the same. And really, if you look at how the fact that Ohio State was leading at the half, Ohio State just missed on like 4 or 5 plays, and Michigan made those plays. Everything that could have gone wrong for Ohio State went wrong. Everything. And whether it was red zone inefficiency, whether it was, just take Cade Stover alone. If they would have connected on 3 of those passes, that is potentially 21 points. Because the fourth down play was right on his hands. The interception was right on his hands up the seam again. And the touchdown, if CJ throws it a hair sooner, and a great play by the corners. I mean, Michigan played fantastic. But we have to look, if you looked at the probabilities of that game, just about everything went perfectly for Michigan. As we said in that preview episode, you aren't going to run for 300 yards or 280 yards against Ohio State like they did the year before. They were going to have to throw the ball, at least try, and they did. It was unbelievable. They did it a different way, and then they had Ohio State back on their heels. But Ohio State had chances in that game. They made all the mental mistakes. They made the turnovers. They missed. They would have had probably a touchdown on the fake punt, and the freaking snapper didn't realize what the play call was. There's a million things. The backup snapper, but still, I mean, dude, you know what I mean? Like, know the play call, bro. And so we said, but the problem I see is at some point it becomes a trend, right? And all year, Ohio State's made the mental mistakes. They've had the penalties. They've had the bump. Oh my God! They just shoot themselves in the foot, and if they do that against Georgia, it's curtains, man. It'll be 50. It'll be 50-30. It'll be the same like that concern.
As good as Georgia is, like just the mental mistakes. Like we get into the red zone, or you get 3rd and 1, or short yardage, and then not only you're not making the short yardage, you're getting a false start or a hold, and just ruins the whole play.
Well, here's a couple things.
35. Can we just talk about the 1st and 35?
Yeah.
And then you punted.
And they almost picked it up. Well, and that was the fake punt. Like they would have gotten it had they gone. Yeah, that was the fake punt. But still, that's the kind of crap that I'm scared to death of. And if they play clean and they get their act together, they can beat them. And the one thing I would say is I would be really, really nervous if I'm a Michigan fan and Ohio State beats Georgia. Very nervous, because that would be a very confident.
I don't want a rematch. Don't call it a rematch. That's going to be the name of our show leading up to that game. Don't call it a rematch, because I don't want that to happen. It's too hard to beat a team twice.
Yeah,
what do you think? What do you think has been like the biggest drop off since like the middle of the season? I think for me, not having Mike Hall healthy to be able to get some pass rush up the middle has been
no
one
question
of the biggest problems of our whole defense.
No question. I mean, the fact that he came out as the starter in the Notre Dame game, I was thinking about that the other day, Matt. I think you're spot on that if you look at one guy's injury that hurt him, even more than JSN, it had to be Michael Hall. The fact that he's been playing, and even more than Travion and everybody else, I think Michael Hall, the fact that he started and was dominant in that Notre Dame, he was the best player on the field in that Notre Dame game. And he has not been able to play like that since. And between him being limited in snaps because of injury and the fact that Tyleek, when they've put Tyleek and Mike Hall on the field together, yeah, they've had flash plays, but they've also made some stupid mental mistakes. And so they're just not getting a lot of snaps. And I think they got to be dudes in this game. Like they got to play a bunch. I think it was like 10 snaps or something crazy like that in the Michigan game that Tyleek played. Like he just hasn't been getting any run, and that dude, like that's the guy that I worry about transferring. I want to see Mike Hall and Tyleek Williams and JT and Jack Sawyer play together next year. The bulk of the snaps. That's what I want.
With Mike Hall, it's an injury. What's going on with Tyleek Williams? Have you heard anything?
No, I don't know. I don't know if it was what it exactly was, but I think what happened, I saw like in the I can't remember if it was the Michigan State game or the Northwestern game. I think it was the Michigan State game. They gave up a big run. They had them pinned back in their goal line, and it was just kind of. It was an example of the kind of crap that one of the reasons I don't think they trust him is like he'll make splash plays, but then he'll jump the gap and he'll leave the defense exposed. And as much as Ohio State plays a lot of this cover zero stuff, like you don't have anybody behind you. So if you get reached or you're out of the gap, it's a big gain. And that I think that's really been some of that stuff with Tyleek is I don't know that it's been health as much as just I don't know if he's just not quite earned, Larry Johnson and the defensive coach's staff's trust. But man, you got to play your best impact, TFL type players in a game like this. Like you got nothing to lose. You're playing with house money. You should arguably shouldn't even be there in the first place. You better play to freaking win. And that was the thing that just pissed me off about the Michigan game in general was I felt like the entire coaching staff coached not to lose.
Yeah.
And they were coaching against the ghost of Blake Corum is what they were doing. It's almost like they thought Michigan was still going to run the same offense with Blake Corum out. So let's get to a comment here because it's kind of like it's lining up with this. Mike is saying the only reason UM had those chances was OSU sold out to stop the run. Very true. And they didn't adjust.
Well, but even then, Cam Brown's touchdown. When you're in that kind of coverage and you're gonna if it's you have to play with the correct leverage. So when he got beat to the outside, it was a touchdown. But that's not if you're gonna miss a tackle, you've got to turn that guy back to the inside. That would have at least given another tackler an opportunity to catch that guy. Yeah, it goes for 30, but it doesn't go for a touchdown. Like that's just bad technique. You look at the other one where the two Michigan players ran into each other. On the one that Nathan Ransom gave up the touchdown.
That was the third one. That was in the second half. That was when the tight end cut it. You're right. Yeah, that was up. Oh my God. The tight end kept running, and Nathan Ransom didn't.
And he didn't. And it was like, and then the double move on Cam Martinez. I mean, everything. That's technique, man. I mean, that's okay. They've been playing cover zero all year. They've been blitzing run gaps all year. And hey, it happens. Tommy Eichenberg had one bad play in that game, and it resulted in a 80-something yard touchdown. One time that Teron Vincent gets reached on by the center and exposes a gap, it goes for 75 and a touchdown. I mean, when they made mistakes, they got punished. They did, and that was. Yeah, good on. I mean, I'm not making excuses. But I certainly think some of that can get cleaned up.
For the Georgia game, though, I mean, think about that for the Georgia game. That isn't going to happen again. It's one of the reasons I'm optimistic for Ohio State. They're not going to be playing with the baggage that they were playing with against Michigan. I mean,
No,
They're just
no,
not. They're going to be playing
no.
probably maybe like a normal game. The Michigan game, I think Michigan was in their heads.
And I think Brian Kelly may have shown some things to Ryan Day on how to attack that coverage. And if Georgia's going to play, and if Georgia's going to play aggressively in coverage, I tend to think the teams that have done the best defensively against Ohio State have not necessarily played press coverage. Michigan did not play press coverage across the board in that game. They did more like what Penn State and some of these other teams, Notre Dame did, where you sit back with two high safeties and you bring your corners and your slot guys, especially your slot guys, and your linebackers are coming downhill immediately. So you're almost daring. It's almost like, I don't know if there's I haven't started, I haven't done that big of a deep dive into the actual play calls, but my sense of it is that Ohio State has a bunch of these run plays with screens tagged as RPOs. And teams know that, and they're almost baiting them into throwing the RPO because they know that our receivers can't block worth a shit. And so they come flying downhill and they snuff out the screen game. But they're playing very conservatively, like with safeties back. You're not typically like Michigan was doing more press to the boundary than they were to the field, but they were not pressing across the board until they got in the red zone.
No, because where it became more easy and less. They became more stingy.
If you ask me, like, how do you stop Ohio State? I would say sit back and make Ohio State grind drives because they're going to make mistakes, and they do.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was, what do you think are some of the sort of the biggest coaching problems as far as with strategy that we're not doing that we should be doing? Like for me, like one of the things with Ryan Day that I don't like, that one of the things that I thought Tressel and Cooper were really good at was when they found a play that worked, they kept running that over and over and over until, they weren't trying to just trick them, one time and then never see the play again, like we did a couple times against Michigan on some of our early run plays that we never came back to. Why not run a play, and if they can't stop it, keep doing it until they can actually stop it? And I never does that. And then
I don't. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and the second thing I wanted him to do was stop trying to give everyone an equal amount of plays. Just because your fullback and your tight end shouldn't be getting the similar amounts of pass attempts as your unbelievable godly receiver who should have won the Blitnikoff today.
Well, so a couple things I would say. One is it's really hard when you're watching football on television to see what's happening with coverage. And if the biggest difference between if you go to a game, almost everything in the passing game is dictated by what the safeties are doing. And you couldn't see it very well on TV, but they were rolling coverage to Marvin Harrison Jr. And you're smart to do that. You're an idiot if you're going to leave him in one-on-one coverage. Now there were opportunities. There was some one-on-one coverage that CJ didn't take advantage of, but a lot of those decisions, you could see CJ was coming down to his second, third read. Like he wasn't trying to go to Cade Stover. I don't even think on that mesh route when he came, I think part of the reason that the ball came out late and was able to be broken up was the fact that he wasn't the primary. On mesh, typically the tight end's the one that's setting the pick. So like the fact that they were in a too high safety look where they were rolling coverage to wherever Marvin Harrison was opening up the seam. And that's why he was throwing to Stover and to some degree we saw some other throws there. But they also, I think they did a really good job of scouting what Ohio State likes to do when they are in call it third and manageable. So there were a couple of them where the one in the fourth quarter where the defensive end came and broke it up and he peeled off, and it was in the first half. They threw it was a slant and it went high, and thank God, because he would have had a pick six. But he dropped out. They had a zone blitz on, and he dropped out, and it was just a beautiful call. I mean, Michigan had scouted that really, really well. They knew that they were going to get a pick based on a certain look, and they did a great job. I didn't have necessarily problems with that. There were a couple of play calls where in the red zone, I think they thought they were going to get man coverage across the board, in the red zone, and they had a couple of plays where the one where Xavier Johnson came on the orbit motion and turned back it's a return motion. So it's the Devontae Smith touchdown that they ran against Ohio State. It's a man beater if you've got a fast enough guy. Well, the problem was Michigan sniffed that out right away. Like anytime Xavier Johnson was either in the backfield or coming in a motion, they knew the ball was going to him. And the same thing happened on I think it was a third down in the fourth quarter where they brought him in a motion, or he was in the backfield, and they went to throw it out, and the same defensive end, 17, went out there and got his hands on it because they knew what was coming. And it's like that's when I think just by formation, they were very predictable. But overall, I didn't have a problem with the play calling. I did have a problem with a couple times, like when we settled for the field goal. I understand why they tried to cut it to 8, but I'm like, at that point, I just felt like they needed to go for it. And what was crazy was early in the game, I loved the play call to go for it on fourth down when they missed over in the seam. I mean, it's right there, 3 inches closer. That might be a touchdown. And they don't get it. But Michigan was playing very conservatively in the first half. There were a couple times I thought Harbaugh should have gone for it, and he didn't. In the second half, he went for it in his own territory on 4th and 1. And
on
I'm
the
like,
35.
Yeah, on the 35 and got it. And then we don't go for it when CJ wants the ball. And I'm like, that's the difference right there. We settled for field goals. You know what I mean? It was like, oh, something's flipped. And all of a sudden now we're the ones doing the James Franklin move of not being aggressive enough when the game's on the line, not realizing, no, the game's on the line in the third quarter, man. You need this now to change momentum, or at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And like, that's why I think it'll be fun to watch them against Georgia. I think, just like you said, Nate, there's no baggage here, right? You just go at Georgia with everything you got. And if you lose, you lose.
So you were saying
that
because they were rolling the coverage to Marvin, that we shouldn't have gone to him more, because he had coming into the game, 0 drops on the year. And
I'm saying you don't force the ball into double coverage if other guys, you expect other guys to be open. You expect Emeka Egbuka to have a bigger game. I expected it. I mean, I said in that preview, I thought Emeka Egbuka was going to get a touchdown in this game. I thought Stoller would have a touchdown because they were going to force the ball to other people. They were going to make Julian Fleming beat you. Georgia's going to make Julian Fleming beat you. They are. And if they don't, if they let Kaylee Ringo sit one-on-one with Marvin Harrison Jr. and they just go, we think our guys are better than yours, very good luck to you, sir, because we're going to light you up. Like, Ohio State may lose, but they're going to, if they really do go, dude on dude and just play man coverage and try to play press man coverage against.
I think they might do that because I think they're cocky enough to that in trouble.
God, I hope so. Because I would like to see a team finally get aggressive with Ohio State. Because the problem is these teams that have been passive and you make Ohio State grind drives, Ohio State makes mistakes.
Yeah,
if
you
get
need more big
aggressive with them,
plays. You don't want to get into that red zone.
No.
I was going to say one of the best parts of having the playoffs, in bowl practice, you have a lot of extra practices anyway, but especially for a playoff game because you have all this extra time. So we're getting all this invaluable experience for these younger players, especially. So who do you think on both teams, or maybe some guys that haven't played as much this year, like last year, Eichenberg and Marvin Harrison sort of came out of nowhere and had huge games in the Rose Bowl. So what do you think, Nate, for Michigan? Do you think anyone that's hasn't played that much this year is going to step up for the playoffs?
Yeah, sort of. One guy's already stepping up, and he's a 5-star corner, Will Johnson. I don't know if you guys watched the Purdue game. He had 2 interceptions. And he started and covered Marvin Harrison Jr. quite a bit in the Ohio State game. I was shocked. The other guy who gave up that touchdown to Marvin Harrison, and that was on a safety blitz. I don't think that was bad coverage when Marvin Harrison caught that. But
no, it's an unbelievable catch.
Safety blitz. He had no help, so he just went through a perfect ball. CJ Stroud threw a perfect ball and went in. And the problem with that is the curse of LeBron James happened. He tweeted, and gave some kudos to Marvin Harrison Jr. And we all know LeBron James, when he's on the sideline for Ohio State, at least for a big game, Ohio State loses. I think the tweet from LeBron James coming in right at the right time, I think maybe put the nail in the coffin for Ohio State right then and there.
So you only have one. Well, you only have one player you think is going to step up for the playoffs?
Yeah, we really don't have. I mean, I don't know if there's any players that we're going to see that are new at this point. We've got a freshman tight end that had a touchdown against Ohio State and in Purdue. All the guys have already stepped up because of these injuries. Our team looks different than it did like 3 weeks ago. So, yeah, I don't know who else could possibly step up at this point.
Well, I think the guy who's got to step up is going to have to be McCarthy, because he's never. I mean, and he seems like a kid who can handle it, but man, it's different now. And at some point, it may not be TCU, because I don't think TCU. Now TCU's got, man, their offense is fun, right? Their offense is fun to watch. Quentin Johnston is a freaking monster, an absolute monster receiver. I don't think even with double coverage, you're going to completely take him out of the game, but. TCU is not going to. They've been down in a lot of games, so even if Michigan's up, they're still going to keep fighting you. But the one thing I don't like about TCU is I think they can be gashed in the run game. So I really think this sets up really well for Michigan to just be able to grind them like they want to with their game plan. Now, when you get to Georgia, though, especially if it's Georgia, you are not going to be able to run on Georgia. You are going to have to throw the ball against Georgia, and at that point, I think it becomes a different animal entirely, because if the whole game is on JJ McCarthy, he did a great job against Ohio State, but any Ohio State fan will tell you that their coverage has been trash all year, trash. Mm-hmm. And so Georgia's got a much better secondary than Ohio State.
Yeah, and that's probably one of their weaknesses is their secondary. I mean, you'd have to think after that game last week against LSU, 500 yards passing. Jeez.
Yeah. But I think also LSU's got. I mean, they finally kind of got their act together with some, and they took a bunch of chances. They were just like, all right, we got nothing to lose. We're going to air it out.
True, but they were firing it away.
They were, but you know what? But that's what I say. I mean, I think just the same as the Ohio State game. The great thing if you're a Michigan fan, the one thing that I would feel really good about is that McCarthy doesn't seem like the moments. He doesn't shy away from big moments, and he did, even though he's not a consistent passer, he did it when he had to against Ohio State. So he can do it. He may be able to do it again, but you got to be that much more precise. I mean, I think if you if you look at just his third down conversions against Ohio State, he wasn't particularly good. He really wasn't. Yeah, it was the big plays that wasn't great. No,
the big plays.
Superman made a comment about Ohio State. It's an underdog too, especially in a revenge game going up against Clemson. That the second time. I mean, I thought they played great the first time. Screwed by the officials, but that revenge game was great. And Ryan Day was playing loose, and like the play calls. Like he was just so aggressive. He was in such a groove. Like everything was done just amazing. So I have faith, in a game where he does have a lot of time to prepare like this.
Hey, you guys,
he'll be able to get something.
I'd feel a hell of a lot better if we had Justin Fields.
Oh,
hey, you guys will like this comment. You guys will like this comment from the badass Buckeye. It says, "What's up, Buckeyes? We will put a leash on them dogs and make them sit."
I like it.
And you know what? Part of me wants that to happen, like, because I don't necessarily, just because my own prediction, like I feel like Ohio State's going to play really good in that game. But
I hope the guards play well. I hope the guards play well, man, because Jalen Carter, I mean, look at the way that Matt Jones has pass blocked and Donovan Jackson pass blocked this year. Like I don't feel confident about that.
What do you think?
I feel like Ohio State's their pass blocking.
How are they going to stop Jalen Carter? How are they going to stop him? Are we going to triple team him or what?
Something. Look, man, pass blocking has been superb all year long. You got two high first rounders, tackles.
Not blocking him. Yeah. Not blocking him.
I will say. No, not blocking him. And I will say, Matt, I think if you could, beyond Mike Hall Jr.'s injury issues, Matt Jones' ankle has not been good. I don't know. I mean, I would think with a month, roughly a month to prepare, that he'll be okay. But I mean, now I will say, I thought Fryer actually came in and played his ass off at right guard. So
yeah,
he played. Now I was really pissed at him early in the game because they kept putting Vamahi in there, and they were like alternating drives, and Vamahi didn't play well at all. But Fryer went in there and took care of that side pretty well. So, but yeah, these dudes, and there have been times when you have seen specifically interior defensive linemen be very disruptive against this Ohio State offense. Not necessarily play in and play out, but we've certainly seen it. And we know that CJ Stroud does not play nearly as well if he's got pressure in his face. Now, I'm not talking about like safeties and blitzes. He does a good job in the back. I think the backs do a really good job of picking up blitzes. But when he feels that rush in his face, he gets his footwork falls apart and his accuracy falls apart. And that's a lot of quarterbacks, understandably, but we've seen this specifically with Stroud. He looks like a different cat when he's back there and has enough time to be, decisive. So that's my only other thing would be, I think to mitigate him, Matt, I think you have to be much more efficient in the quick passing game. And that's really hurt Ohio State, that they haven't had their screen game. They were so much better in the screen game last year even though Olave and Wilson aren't necessarily big dudes, but with Egbuka and not Egbuka, JSN and those other two guys, not only were they unbelievable wide receivers, but they really blocked well too. These guys have not blocked well all season on the perimeter.
Yeah, and then our tight ends can't block on the perimeter either. So it's just the combination of that, just taking away a big part of our playbook. And I mean, I don't know why they keep trying to run it when we obviously don't have the personnel that are capable this year of doing that.
We were running for 6 yards a pop against Michigan. They were running with a freaking converted linebacker, a guy who hadn't even played. I mean, none of their good running backs were even in that game, and they were running all over Michigan. That was what was crazy. It wasn't like I didn't fault the play calling necessarily. I thought they were moving the ball. They just didn't seal the deal. That game's totally different.
Third downs were horrific.
It was awful, but look how much different that Michigan game would have been if they had scored that second drive. If they had scored another touchdown, I think Michigan loses a lot of confidence because they're like, oh shit. But the fact that they stopped them and settled for the field goal, and then they had the big play touchdown, and it's 10-10, different game. Even though they went ahead, they had the lead, but the margin for error was very, very small. So I think if they can clean up the penalties, not get themselves, when they're in 3rd and 1, don't get a freaking false start and put it at 3rd and 6 because Georgia won't make you pay for that.
I hate to make a positive comparison for Michigan, but when J.J. McCarthy threw that touchdown where Cam Brown slipped and he housed it, that reminded me of either the Predator getting bloody when we were like, we cut it if he can bleed. If he bleeds, we can kill it. Or like when Rocky finally cut the Russian in Rocky IV. Yeah. And that sort of felt like they got such a huge amount of confidence from that play.
Well, the crazy thing, though, in that game, and I'm sure you guys have already done a postmortem, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to join for that, but the other thing about that, though, was
I like talking about that game.
Well, even then, I thought, like, even down to the chance when they had the chance, I thought the one that actually broke Ohio State's back was the really long drive when they got the PI by Hickman in the end zone. McCarthy threw that ball up for grabs. That had no chance of getting caught. He had no chance of getting caught. And Hickman, the safeties that have played so well for Ohio State all year, played like shit in that game. And each one of them had a major mistake. And that one was
I
Hickman.
was worried about the corners, and it was the safeties that let us down.
And of all the corners, the one that you thought would play well would be Cam Brown. Like, everybody that you counted on played like shit in that game on defense.
It was bizarre.
He had one bad play. The corners didn't have a terrible game. The safeties were horrific.
The safeties were bad, and that PI right there, it changed the dynamic of the game because then it gave them an opportunity to, and they still almost stopped them. So like that drive right there, if you make Michigan settle for a field goal there, get the ball back and take it back down and score, you still have a chance to win that game. But it was just the defense was just cashed by the end of that half. They were just on the field the entire second half, and so like I said, I'm the one thing that it gives me some confidence going into Georgia that I think Georgia will be slightly overconfident. I think Ohio State will play looser than they did against Michigan, and they can't play as bad a game as they did against Michigan. It's impossible. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong against Michigan. Everything.
Yeah, it did. At the shoe. But you know what?
Yeah.
Here's the worst thing that could happen though with Georgia is this is like kind of a nightmare. They could beat Ohio State and then beat Michigan. And then Georgia and the SEC will have all these bragging rights. Like I almost just want Ohio State to take them out. And then I don't want to have a rematch with Ohio State, but I almost just wish Ohio State would take them out so we don't have to go through that. Like, but at the same time,
it's the Big Ten against Georgia. Yeah, I mean, it's the best we have against them, and either we stack up and hopefully if Ohio State loses, I hope Ohio State takes enough out of them that they're beatable. Even though it would mean Michigan as a national champ, I do not want Georgia. I'm done with the SEC. I'm done with Georgia.
Yeah,
I do not want to see that dominance.
Terrible situation, and I don't know if it's better for Michigan if you guys have a really tough game with them and it's down to the wire, or would that give Georgia a lot of confidence if that happened?
No,
I think and then Michigan plays Georgia with a lot of confidence.
No, I would say, I mean, if I'm a Michigan fan, I want that to be as physical and demanding a game emotionally and physically as possible. You want that game to come down
the Ohio State Clemson game. Remember what the Clemson players were saying after they lost or after they beat us?
Exactly. Exactly right. They were done, and then they went against Alabama, and just got crushed. No, I'm sorry. It was LSU. That was the LSU year. Yeah, that was the Joe Burrow year. And we all know that Ohio State would have given LSU at least a better game than Clemson did, but they couldn't seal the deal. But yeah, I mean, Clemson was toast coming out of that game. It's got to be the way. Yep.
You guys have some supporters here from Buckeye fans here. Return of the Jedi Rusty Spooner says, "What's up, fellow Buckeyes? Let's go."
OH.
Yeah.
So let's talk about strategy. So, you were saying that nobody runs on this Georgia team, but do you think that people just don't even try? I mean,
I think they try. It's just they're so stout.
Consistently. Like, look at Michigan against us. They not only tried, like they didn't give up. They had 10 yards rushing in the first half. They kept going until they finally got it working.
Yeah, but they only got that going because you had to start backing off in coverage some. You just couldn't sit in zero the whole time because you're getting burned. Like they had to make adjustments to account for the passing strength, and we all knew that our coverage has been a liability all year. I think Georgia's just so much stronger on the like you said. I mean, you said it, Matt. If Tyleik Williams and Michael Hall Jr. were just dudes who were playing like 35, 40 snaps a game up front. I mean, I'm not saying Teron Vincent's been bad. I think he's been pretty good, but they got a bunch of running a bunch of dudes in there, and they're not really impact players. But Georgia's got a bunch of like animals inside that even though their linebackers aren't as good as they were last year, they're still just really stout. You're just not going to you're not going to butter your bread running in power against that team. I think you're going to have to do some things to keep them a little bit off balance.
Well, what's funny is so like our strength against Michigan, and actually it seems like the last couple of weeks we were running a lot better. We finally started running it up the middle, and we were doing all the stretch plays that kept getting stopped previously. And from what I've heard, Georgia's only real weakness in the run game is the stretch. It'd be funny, like that's finally like the thing that we've been trying to get working all year. If we could finally get that going against them, that would be good. But do you think like the better strategy is to see if we can really find a way to like wear them down by running on them, or do you think it's easier to maybe wear them down by just lots of like hurry up and quick passing game?
I think it's a little bit of both. Well, I think so most runs have some kind of a pass tag associated with it, right? So there's a read for the quarterback. If you get formational strength that gives you a free access to a throw, you take the throw. If you get and it could be different things. It could be a slant, it could be a glance, it could be a screen, whatever that is. Sometimes it's just as simple as counting it. And the And then you've obviously got the runs, and a lot of those runs also have a quarterback read to them. So it's almost like triple option football. We've seen that C.J. Stroud had opportunities to pull the ball against Michigan, and again didn't do it. He's got to be willing to run the ball. We said it against Michigan. It would have been a difference maker. He didn't do it. He's got to be able to run the ball occasionally just to keep defenses honest. And then, secondly, we haven't seen what Ohio State's running attack can do. We've only seen it a couple times, right? Like Notre Dame in the second half when they decided to quit screwing around, and the Northwestern game, and both times it was Mayan Williams. And Mayan Williams has been dinged up.
Wisconsin too.
And Wisconsin. So like only a handful of times, and I think a lot of that goes back to the running back health, which we've had beat up running backs all year. I'm sorry, I'm over Travion Henderson. The best running back on this team is Mayan Williams. And he needs to be healthy to give Ohio State a chance because they need that physical runner. I mean, think about I don't think they would have beaten Alabama, but when Trey Sermon went out of that Alabama game, it was curtains for Ohio State, right? Like we have to have that physical running back because Maya Williams will run it up in there, and we need him. We need Chip. We need I don't know if Dallin Hayden's going to play or not, but like Maya Williams has to play, and then to me the guards. You cannot run. You can't put Matt Jones out there if he's not 100% healthy. Do not play him. Do not play him.
Hey, real quick question. So Antoine says that now did CJ actually say this? That he said running the ball is a running back's job?
Yes, he did.
He did. Oh no,
man.
Well, I guess you have your answer about whether or not CJ is going to run.
It's weird.
He's pretty awkward when it
Maryland
happens.
Game. He ran the ball a few times, and he took a big hit on one of those runs.
Yeah, all he has to do is run out of bounds every once in a while, right? I mean, take some wide open field, and he doesn't have to take hits.
Well, there were times like there was a play I can't remember exactly.
Antoine, by the way, I didn't know that.
It's crazy, man. Like that's what I say. You gotta have a like Stetson Bennett is a very underrated runner. Like that dude, I think that's still one of the best runs I've seen all year. Was that one where he literally almost broke a guy's ankles, in the red zone. It was I think it was a linebacker or safety had an open shot on him, and he just shook the shit out of this guy. And go back to the Tennessee game. The first touchdown was Stetson Bennett on the run. Like that dude can make plays running the ball. And I think a quarterback has to do that. In modern football, your quarterback has to be able to occasionally extend plays and make things happen. And CJ can run around and throw the ball, but I'm talking about like sometimes it's just, no, I'm going to go pick up this first down by myself. And you have to do that. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, it's not even for the fact that he's picking up the first down. It's more so just a threat because the defense has to play differently if there is a threat for that. And if they don't even have to worry about it.
Yeah, and if they don't, you hurt them. You absolutely hurt them. And that was like there was a play where the Michigan defensive end came screaming down the line at the running back, and if he pulls it, he probably runs for 20 yards, and he didn't pull it. And you're like, what are you doing, dude? This is high school stuff. Like, you got to be willing to pull it and go.
Yeah. And you know what? Antoine just made another good point. He says and y'all actually think he's going to decide to run against Georgia, one of the hardest hitting teams. I would be surprised. And this is right before his draft too, right? He's going to be coming out of the Heisman. He's got maybe one, maybe two more games to play. I don't see him doing it. I mean, I'd like to see it.
I don't care how healthy you are. Like if you want to impress NFL scouts, you better show a willingness to do it against the hardest hitting team in college football. Because you're going to do it. You're going to have to do it in the NFL. I guarantee it. You look at the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Whether it's Josh Allen, Mahomes, Burrow. You don't have to be a runner. You don't have to be Lamar Jackson or Justin Fields, but you have to be able to occasionally get a first down, man. Like you make the defense account for all the skill position guys, you included.
I feel like CJ, if he hasn't done it now, he's probably not going to do it against Georgia, and it's not going to hurt his draft stock, right? I mean, because he's already top 5. There's really no reason for him to run.
Okay, but here's the problem I see. Nate, you asked the question the last time we did a show: is CJ Stroud a legit NFL quarterback? And the answer is I don't know. He better be. If Ohio State's going to win this game, he better be. He's going to have to start showing he's got that toughness and that leadership now. I don't care where you get drafted. The NFL history is littered with guys who are drafted high and washed out because they're not tough. Like, you got to be a badass to be a really good quarterback in the NFL. You've got to be a badass, dude. Nobody questions. Joe. They're better athletes than Joe Burrow. They're dudes who C.J. Stroud may even be able to throw the ball better than Burrow. That's a tough son of a bitch who is he's competitive as hell. He's going to try to beat you no matter what. And he's got anticipation and accuracy. Those are the things that make him special. But like, we haven't seen that from C.J. Stroud. We saw that from Justin Fields, man. Like, Justin Fields, Hutchinson almost tore up his knee in that Michigan game. He came right back one snap later and threw a touchdown against Michigan. In the Clemson game, that linebacker from Clemson damn near broke his ribs. He came right back in the game, through a touchdown pass.
That was one of the best plays I've ever seen an Ohio State player make.
Tough son of a bitch. And that's what C.J. Stroud's got to be, man. Like, there's going to come a moment, if Ohio State's going to win, especially if they got a chance to beat both of these teams, it's going to have to be him. It just is.
Let's talk about TCU for a second. Do you think that even in the matchup looks heavily in Michigan's favor, and their quarterback JJ has been showing a lot of confidence lately? What do you think about Hacksaw Jim Duggan over there making all these plays and just going crazy? And it seems like he can't be stopped. I mean, he was just unbelievable towards the end of that game. I wonder if he can pull some more miracles out of his hat.
Like the Baylor
game.
He
might. He might. Hacksaw might do it, but I don't think they have the defense to win that game. Michigan's just going to shut down.
Did you see the game against Texas? Bijan Robinson had 33 yards.
Yeah, they did do a great job against them, and they really did. And they made Ewers have to be accurate on consistently, and he couldn't do it. And JJ McCarthy has that in him too. He's not a consistent, accurate passer. If you can make him, grind drives throwing the ball. No, I'm saying, like, if Michigan has to win a game where, he's got to throw the ball, say 30 times, 25 to 30 times, and he's got to complete 65 to 70% of his passes, you're not winning. So, that's I tend to think like that conference was better than people give it credit for. Like, I'm not saying there are any dominant teams in the Big 12, but there were some good teams, and there were a lot of consistently competitive games. TCU was in a lot of competitive games this year, so they're not going to be intimidated, and they've come back big in games, so they're not going to be intimidated by being down a score or two. But
I wonder
it's
if
just
top to bottom that they're the best conference this year, because they, like you said, they don't have
my
a
gosh.
team. I mean, TCU.
You're not saying the Big
really
12
good.
is.
No, they were really good. Their top to bottom, their conference was very, very good. It was very underrated. That's why TCU was getting the benefit of that's why TCU is getting the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I have to point something out. We might have a serious problem brewing in the comments right now. I don't know if you can see this or not, but Diego is spamming our show right now. He's saying things like, bring Terps fans back on the show. And I don't know if anyone saw any of those shows when Diego was a part of this, but he did keep bringing it back to Maryland. If I could have figured out how to use the mute button, I would have used it on Diego, but it's just this could be a big brewing issue with Diego spamming our comments.
Let me give Maryland a little bit of credit there that, I discounted it because I thought it was a bit of a look ahead, but I really think Mike Locksley kind of exposed some things about how to attack Ohio State and showed a lot of flaws we should have seen coming more than I really wanted to. And I was very nervous in that game because I think Mike Locksley is one of the best offensive minds in college football. And they really gave Ohio State a hell of a game. And really they played Michigan competitively too. So, that program is I think that program's in an ascension. They just, like Mike Locksley said, they just haven't figured out how to win those big games yet. But they are fun. They're a fun team to watch for sure. Just not when they're coming close to upsetting your team.
Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah, and Antoine, we are really good as the backdoor Buckeyes, especially back in 2014, sneaking in there. That worked out
that's a
nicely
good
the
comment.
last time way back then.
We are definitely not good at being the favorite. I didn't feel good at all about the spread in the Michigan game. I don't like it when we're a big favorite like that. We do not tend to play well. I love when we play as the underdog.
You were smart about that. You didn't. You were like, "Hey, I'll just take the spread. That's fine." Begrudgingly the spread. So yeah,
I didn't want it.
End up kind of coming true.
Yeah, I really didn't want it. I mean, there's certain times like I feel much better when the spread's really close, or in this case they'll come in as an underdog. Fantastic. And I would think even if they beat Georgia, they'll still probably be an underdog to Michigan.
I don't think so.
No, I've heard that we would be a 2 or 3 point favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
That
to me that
just
depends on how the game against Georgia goes, but that's what I think. Like
that's
if we played
interesting.
right now, we would be a small favorite.
It amazes me that they're still even Vegas is still not on Michigan. That they're really still not getting that much respect.
Because Michigan they were one type of team. Vegas likes consistency, right? I mean, they were one type of team until they lost Blake Corum, and now they're kind of questionable.
Are they? Donovan Edwards
they're really
good.
They're really good.
Now,
Don't get me wrong. They beat Ohio State.
Like what's really cool though. What I really like, and Ryan Day talked about it in one of his press conferences a little bit, but it's something that I follow a lot of coaches on high school and college coaches on social media and stuff. Listen to them, and one of the things more on the X's and O's side. And there really has been this shift, right? So the spread concepts came different places, but the passing spread offense really came from like Texas high school football, right? And it's proliferated all through every level of football. And you get these teams that are wide open, want to move the ball, throw the ball, and you had to have these defenses that had to get smaller and faster to combat that. Well, then the natural progression is, well, if everybody else is zigging, I'm going to zag. I'm going to go back to playing power football. And that plays right into what Harbaugh loved to do going back to his Stanford days. He just didn't have the right quarterbacks and the right skill guys to mesh up to really run it. And now they've got, they did a really good job of filling some holes, and then they got, a couple guys. But I still think, Edwards is still a dangerous running back. Obviously he's not as dynamic as Corum, but with McCarthy and some of those guys, they are a dangerous team. I mean, they're putting up 40 points on teams week in and week out. I don't know what they want. Why? Because they don't look like Tennessee. They don't look like Ohio State. They don't look like USC.
I think Vegas
look at the scores.
Vegas is thinking they might be fraudulent, even though what they've done so far has been pretty amazing last 2 games. But they knew who Michigan was when Blake Corum was there. And I don't think they know exactly who they are right now. And I get that because I kind of have those same feelings myself. But let me ask you this. Who would you rather have, Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards, if you had to pick between the two?
Well, I think it just depends. A lot of it depends on the scheme that you've got. I mean, to me, it seems like Edwards is more of the either one cut type zone runner that has the ability to break any play for a touchdown, right? Versus the guy who's more the jump cut guy that even if you've got it, you don't necessarily have the front blocked up perfectly. He's going to figure out a way to consistently get 5, 6, 7 yards, and then he's going to break some too, because he's the guy you can give the ball to 30 times, and he's just going to wear a defense down. I don't think you're going to wear the defense down with Edwards, but he's just got more of that explosive potential. That's the way I see it. But I mean, your roster better than I do. So
yeah, I mean, I want them both, honestly. I mean, like we did earlier, but Edwards was actually, we didn't have many games where Edwards and Blake Corum were both healthy. Yeah. And I mean, I thought that's what we were going to get against Ohio State until Blake got hurt against Illinois. It was just devastating. But they've just done it a different way. That's probably one of the things that went in their favor. I said this before the game, but I didn't really believe it. I thought it might actually be a benefit having, excuse me, sorry about that, having Corum out, that it just screwed up the defensive game plan for Jim Knowles. I mean, I kind of got that impression.
I don't think that really changed it. I think what happened again was the fact that they gashed them on these explosive pass plays. And that was they were going to try to stop the run regardless of who you had back there. You could have had that converted linebacker back there. It wouldn't matter. They were just not going to let you. They were going to try to get numbers in the box no matter how they had to do it. And they were sacrificing the protection on the top end of their defense. And Michigan took advantage of it. And then when they tried to make adjustments, then they started giving up 5-6 yards a run. And it was just high risk, high reward. And Michigan just made the plays. I don't think that schematically they would have changed anything. It was just a combination of weird factors. I don't know how you can sit back against that kind of attack with your safeties way over the top. Like, you just can't. Maybe single high, but you can't sit back with two. You sit back in too high defense against Michigan, they're going to just grind you to death. And that would be the thing with, if I'm game planning for Michigan, I want the ball. I want ball control. I don't want Duggan and that TCU offense on the field. So we'll just take it. And, even if it's like, they have that tendency. I would be curious if a team can get up on Michigan early, because no one's really been able to do that. So even when Michigan kind of, like the Purdue game, they didn't play a great half. Against Ohio State, they didn't play a great first half. They did enough to keep with Ohio State and stay within striking distance. And then several of those games, they just take it away in the second half. The Illinois game was the tightest game they've been in, where the offense just never got it going. But Illinois has, arguably, they have the best secondary in the Big Ten. They're much better than Ohio State's. So
some players against Michigan too. Otherwise, it would have been even worse.
Yeah.
Hey, so wrapping this up a little bit, we're I think about an hour and a half in. I wanted to ask you guys some questions. Like, basically, we, Brian, too. First question: Who are you afraid of losing on the Ohio State roster? Because I earlier in this show we were talking about the NIL, the transfer portal. I'd love to hear from both of you guys. Who are you afraid to lose the most? And you don't need to speculate on whether they would, because that may not be fair to them or us. But who would you rather? Who are you afraid to lose the most?
Matt, you want to take that?
Go for it, Matt.
I think the only person that I would be really concerned about, because a lot of our best players are going pro after this year. So really, like, the only stars that we have that would be a concern at this point would be JTT or Harrison. Outside of bad, but not like, program ending, like those would be.
I really couldn't agree more. Those are the two guys that JT jumped out right away. And obviously Marvin Harrison. And you do, with Ohio State, I've been saying really since the beginning of the year, I feel like it's a 2-year window to win a championship, because as long as they can keep the nucleus of the team together, even though they're losing the 2 tackles, they can probably go into the portal and fill at least one of those spots, if not both. I think the defense next year could be one of the best we've ever had if that entire group comes back. But you're going to lose guys here and there, but what you don't have is a bunch of skill guys behind Egbuka and Harrison that are just ready to jump in. I don't think that wide receiver class last year was nearly on the same par that it's been the last handful of years. And if they can hold this class together, it's really going to be something, but it's probably going to be a couple years. But I don't necessarily care whether it's Kyle McCord, whether it's Devin Brown, whether they go to the portal for a quarterback. They're going to put up numbers with Marvin Harrison and Egbuka next year, and whoever's in, Mayan Williams back there, and they'll probably lean more on the running game next year anyway. But the defense should be, with everybody back, pretty damn good next year. if everybody stays.
You would think. And next year, that'll be another show. But my gosh, the quarterback for Ohio State's going to be the biggest story. I think for Michigan, as far as losses, I think it would be at the running back position for me. And I could see, like we were saying before, just someone saying, I'm getting all this money, so this other team's offering me all this money and you guys aren't. And I wouldn't blame them for doing it. That's kind of the problem. If someone's offering them a huge amount of money to leave, like a Donovan Edwards, like I don't think he would leave. I'm not saying that he would, or like even have any info or anything like that, but no speculation. I'm just pointing out that would probably be the scariest thing for me.
I would think like for you guys, it might be, some of the young offensive linemen that you've developed. You've really got something cooking with the way that the offensive line has turned around the last couple of years. I'm still in the camp that running backs are largely replaceable. Certainly the drop off from, a Blake Corum to your third string guy is going to be, like when you lose Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson and Evan Pryor in the same year for large chunks of the year. Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different when you're down to your fourth, fifth string. But even then, a team like Ohio State has their fifth string running back is running for 6 yards a pop against Michigan. You know what I mean? It's not like but you're not going to do that if you go to your backup center or your backup left tackle. Most teams don't have the quality that you're still going to be contending for conference championships and national championships that way.
Or your backup long snapper. Which would happen to Ohio State, right?
That's probably what cost the USC. They couldn't handle the rush. I think one of their top offensive linemen got hurt prior to the game, prior to the Pac-12 championship game, and then one of their top linemen got hurt in the game. So, those combined with Caleb getting hurt too, like it was just
very few teams
a good line.
And I thought, especially was the right tackle. How he's like what's your right tackle? What year is he?
Oh, Trente Jones. I think
was he a sophomore?
Redshirt sophomore, maybe.
Yeah, like
he was new this year.
He's been really good. He's been really good. I mean, those are the guys that when you can get a guy that you weren't necessarily counting on that steps up even though DeJuan Jones, he really has become a solid player. I don't know that he's going to go as high in the draft as some Buckeye fans think he's going to, but he's a really solid player. He was wasn't he like the last guy in the class, Matt? Like he was definitely not a 5-star kid. He was not Paris Johnson Jr. by any means, but if you can get those guys and develop them into really quality players, but most of these programs, hell, even at the NFL level, you lose a starting caliber offensive tackle. Most teams don't have the depth to really sustain that loss. So that's the biggest one I think to watch for Ohio State beyond the quarterback position, which is kind of obvious. I think the fact that they're going to lose 2 really, really good bookend tackles.
Recruiting hasn't been great. Like we were having an unbelievable run of tackles, and then all of a sudden, last year and this year, we haven't been able to land any top guys.
Yeah, I would think I think they're gonna almost certainly go into the portal for at least one of those.
They have no choice.
Yeah.
That and also defensive linemen were missing out because they're these guys are allegedly getting like a couple $1 million a year now for some of these top 5-star defensive ends down south. Like I don't know how you can compete with that.
Well, and it sucks when if you believe the rumors, we were in the lead for at least 2 of the top 3, and we're probably not going to get any of them because of NIL bullshit.
Yep, exactly. All right, guys, let's wrap this up.
Yeah.
This was a fantastic show. Thank you so much for joining, Brian. Definitely going to be talking again before the game because we're going to have our picks, right?
For sure.
It's too soon to really come up with scores or picks, but that's going to be a lot of fun. So. Yeah, thank you both. Thank you both. Thanks to everyone for joining on the call and all the comments. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to everyone soon. Go Blue.
OH.